Well, I think we're going to get started and underway, everyone. This is Donna Haghighat, and here you can see me now. Thank you to Kelly for organizing this Timely Topics conversation. Kelly is going to be behind the scenes kind of monitoring our chat box, so if any of you have any questions about what the Women's Fund is up to, I'll give you a real brief update about that, and then we'll dive into some interesting conversation that Amy Jamrog and I are going to have. But if you have any questions in either part of these conversations, please put them in the chat box. And if I don't notice them, Kelly will, and we'll make sure that we address those questions as well. So I do want to welcome you all to our first conversation of this fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts July 1st. These used to be known as our CEO quarterly updates. We used to do them by phone, and now that seems like dinosaur age kind of things. And we really enjoy having adapted to this technology to be able to see some of your smiling faces. Even if we can't see you in person, we can at least see you virtually. So welcome. And just wanted to share some quick updates for you all about the Women's Fund and how, with your support, we ended the year well last year. Last year being June 30th. I know with us nonprofits, it's always weird when we end our years. But you know, last year, thanks to your support, we gave away almost $160,000 in grants to program partners, organizations that are committed to ending sexual violence in our region, organizations that our young women and our Young Women's Initiative identified as organizations that are working to address barriers that these young women are seeing in their lives in Springfield, and so much more. So thank you so much for that. We also did graduate 2 amazing classes of champions from both our LIPI, which stands for Leadership Institute for Political and Public Impact program, and also our Young Women's Initiative. And of course, as you can imagine, both programs had to be pretty adaptive with COVID raging. They went to virtual as well. Now looking ahead to this coming year, and really this is why we've invited Amy to be part of this conversation, we wanted to share some of the things that we're doing in this coming year. We've just finished strategic planning, and our 4 pillars that we are really making priorities for the Women's Fund in these next couple of years are economic security for women and girls, parity in positions of power, freedom from violence and abuse, and also nurturing a diverse, inclusive, and thriving nonprofit community that's serving women and girls in our region. And we also wanted to make sure that we're working at the intersections of gender and racial justice. This is something that the Women's Fund had been working towards even before George Floyd's murder. But once George Floyd's murder happened, we realized that we needed to do even more around this work, both internally and externally. And with looking at how COVID-19 has been affecting women in particular in terms of economics, we thought that it was really particularly important to center women of color in some of our economic security work in particular. And so we came up with the idea of a series we're calling Power Women Hour that is going to launch in September. And we wanted the focus of Power Women Hour to be particularly women of color, because we knew that very oftentimes women of color were being left out of programs that you've probably heard about, like the Paycheck Protection Act and other programs that were helping to bolster or keep afloat small businesses. And that was because they sometimes lacked banking relationships. And we also knew that women of color owned businesses had already faced many more barriers than other businesses in just getting off the ground and running, and then COVID happens. So we wanted to pay most attention to women of color owned businesses, and we spoke with Amy about this idea, about this series, not only just about sponsorship, but as those of you who know, Amy is very well connected and she always knows the most amazing women. So we figured she would also know some women that we should highlight in the series. But when we spoke with Amy about the program, she was so inspired and thrilled and wanted to be a part of it that she right away said she and the Jamrog group wanted to be the lead sponsors of this series that's going to launch in September. And so I thought it would be amazing to have Amy join us today and talk a little bit about why she made that decision, and also to share with you the history of why Amy loves the Women's Fund so much. Many of you may not know that Amy was one of our earliest board members at the fund and has always believed in us since day one, and is so excited to see how we grow. So I think without further ado, Amy, I'd love to hear from you. What has inspired you to become the lead sponsor, the Jamrog Group, of the Power Women Hour series?
Thanks. So I'm thinking, flashing back to 6-8 weeks ago, when our country just seemed to be kind of a complete mess. And, as someone who's an activist and an advocate, and certainly for women and always has been, and then given our office is a team comprised of all women financial advisors, I think of myself as a pretty resourceful person. I think of myself as a person who is not afraid to speak up. And I found myself at a loss for words. When with BLM, in being a white, person with privilege, even trying to re-articulate how inarticulate I was. And I talked to many of you. I watched social media posts, and I kept thinking, we have to do something. We have to take a stand. We have to speak up. And so I called some of my colleagues, other financial advisors, and I asked what they were doing. And overwhelmingly, the response was, ugh, your safest bet is to stay quiet on this one. This is controversial. You're going to offend people. As someone who's white, you should just be quiet about this. This is not your issue. And I was even more outraged, because it's everyone's issue. And so Jessica and I sat down with our team and said, okay, so what can we do? And I see this as an opportunity. I see this whole movement right now as an opportunity either to teach or to learn. And for us, I think it's time for us to do both. So we have a tremendous amount of learning to do. But I also know that, if we stay in our lane, we know money. We know how to teach about money. We know that money is powerful. And when women are educated around money, that gives them more power, more confidence, and more clarity. So I said, look, if we can learn from our sisters about what's important, if we listen, and then we can kind of stay in our lane and then teach a component here around money, that would be the coming together of some great things. So where do we even begin? And so ironically, Jessica and I were talking about building some kind of series. In the same week that we were talking about it, you called. And so it's like a perfect example of the Women's Fund, always at the forefront of the right conversations, and then always willing to collaborate. So it was, you were creating the thing that we were hoping we could create. And so it seemed better and bigger to come together than to try to do this separately.
That's awesome. And I love that you said that you thought that the keys around this, if we're going to make progress happen, it's about teaching and learning. And that's really the foundations of what we're trying to do with this Power Women series. We've identified Black women entrepreneurs. Some of them are in the catering or restaurant business. Some of them are in mental health, different things. But the focus for us has been, what is it that they can teach us or share with us? And originally, when we first came up with this idea, of course, most organizations were still sort of in lockdown or shutdown. And so we knew also that a lot of these women were in fields or industries that were most likely to be shuttered because of the type of industry they were in, whether it's food service or nail salons or hair care or different things like that. But we think that there's still, even hopefully will still stay open in some of these areas. they can still teach us via video something that our viewers who tap into this can learn something, but they can also learn about the journey of each woman entrepreneur and some of the barriers that they are facing. And I'm glad, Amy, that you mentioned your lane as being financial literacy. And as part of our series, we are going to devote the January series episode to financial literacy. And I know that you're teaming up with Michelle Ransom, I believe it is, from Mass Mutual, a Black financial advisor. And can you kind of give us an idea of what that particular segment will be about?
Sure. So, Michelle and I are colleagues, and we joke that we're unicorns in our business. So financial advisors still, if you can even imagine, are only 23% women, even though across the board, you talk to anyone who says, who would you prefer to work with, a male or a female advisor? The majority of people say they would prefer to work with a female advisor, yet it's a struggle in our industry and has been I've been in the business for 23 years. That number hasn't made much progress. And then when you take the 23% of us in the business, only less than 4% are women of color. So, we as advisors are not representative of our communities, especially the communities who need the most education and help and support. And so Michelle and I are going to come together, and I love that we're positioned kind of in the middle of the series.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be able to learn and listen for a number of months about where these women are coming from, what their stories are, what they currently need. This isn't over. The pandemic, and we're only at the beginning of it. I don't know that we've even seen in the aftermath what this will mean for folks financially. And so in the middle of the series, Michelle and I are going to share with everyone what we've seen are the top mistakes that women make with their money. The things that are easy to teach, simple tweaks and changes that we can make that would make a giant difference for ourselves, for our families, for our kids, for our taxes, and for our sustainability of our companies, and certainly for retirement to be more successful. So we're going to focus on the gamut, short, medium, and long term, what women can do now to make a huge difference for later.
That's awesome. And I think that it's really important as well that it's going to apply even, like you said, to women either who have businesses or who are hoping to start a business, right? Because I think this series will perhaps also inspire those folks who are thinking about potentially launching a business. It may inspire them to do that. And so this segment, I think, will also help folks understand perhaps what you would need to get there, or the things that you should be thinking of as well. So I love that. Now, before we launched into our conversation right now, Amy, you were sharing with us about your book. Would you like to share a little bit about what your book is about and who it's helping?
Sure. Well, my hope is that it can help everybody. The book will launch in August. I say you'll be able to read what's been in my head for the last 10 years in terms of helping folks. But the book itself is called Life Savings Conversations, and it focuses on the 10 most important money conversations that we'll all have in life. Mm-hmm. So everything from talking to your fiance before getting married about money, to talking with your young children about allowances, how do you talk as a family about money, to how to prepare for divorce, which is going to be, I think, a very big aftermath of the pandemic. Divorce already is skyrocketing. And so women need to be prepared and educated around that subject as well. So everything from talking with your kids to talking to your elderly parents about money, how to just transform the conversation so that it takes away the fear, it takes away the feeling like you're being impolite in addressing these types of subjects with your own family or your own relationships. Mm-hmm. And my hope is that people will read it and get some really simple takeaways to change or open up a dialogue that they otherwise wouldn't have known where to begin that conversation.
That's wonderful. And I think it's also really important because often we just forget that it's important to have that conversation. I know when my children were growing up, sometimes you're just sort of in autopilot and you forget that you should be teaching your children when you're at the grocery store or when you go out to eat, like what things cost or different things like that. So I think that is it sounds like a book that can help everyone. We appreciate that.
That's exactly why it was written, for the general audience. And I'm excited to get these ideas into the hands of a lot of people, because I can only speak to one person at a time, and I can meet with as many people as I can in the course of a week. But this for me is a way to exponentially share the conversation.
That's wonderful. I want to invite folks who are on this call or this meeting to please use the chat box. If you have any questions, we'd love to pose them either to Amy or to myself. And in the meantime, I'll carry on with this exciting conversation. Amy, I know that one thing that both you as a leader of your organization and I as a leader of the Women's Fund have been grappling with is, how do we diversify our own teams at work, right? We find ourselves with a mostly white staff, right? And so what are you thinking in this time about that? And yeah, if you could just share.
It's funny. I keep saying the work is never done, right? We're constantly trying to do better, be better. And it wasn't that long ago, I was speaking with a group of financial advisors, of course, primarily white men. And I was introduced as someone who has one of the most diverse financial planning teams. They're a team of all women. And I was getting this credit for being, quote unquote, diverse. And in our industry, we seem kind of diverse, but if you look closely, we're very white. And so there are 7 of us on our team, and yes, we're all women, which is unusual in the industry, but it doesn't represent our community. And so this is a challenge, and we're working on a couple of different things. The first thing that we're most excited about is we're going to launch an internship, and we're going to work with our local colleges, however that's going to look in terms of how education looks right now, but using technology and pairing with the local colleges. And what we're trying to do is teach more women through an internship about money, but that it would be a paid internship. And so putting that out there, anyone who has college students who are interested in learning more about money. And then ultimately the goal is to pair with other female financial advisors in the area, where we can start to build a bench of junior female advisors, because we all need to be thinking about business succession, the next generation. I'm going to be 49 this year. So, somebody 20-something might not want to work with me, but a 20-something-year-old female might relate better to them. So we really want to have advisors that represent all the different generations, not just diversity as well. So internship is one thing. The other thing we're really excited about in terms of being able to help more people, if anything positive is coming out of this pandemic, it's the use of technology. And so we're able to think very differently about geography and open up our services to anyone, anywhere, because we don't have to necessarily be in person to make a difference, to have that educational conversation and to reach out to more people. So we're also starting to build workshops online to reach more people of different socioeconomic backgrounds, to just educate as many people as we can. It's what's so great about it is if it doesn't have to be one person at a time, one couple at a time, but it could be more classroom style, then we think that the impact would be much greater.
Yes, and I think that that's an awesome way to pivot off of some of the benefits that are coming from this pandemic, is learning how to work differently and really learning that who we work with can expand, right? We're not confined necessarily to our region or who physically shows up in the room.
Right. And the other piece too that I find, this is the biggest challenge I think that we have. I can do my part on a local level with my own practice and my team, but we've got some major barriers to entry when it comes to women, definitely for women of color, becoming financial advisors. This has, without saying it's historically been a male industry, of course, but it's also very difficult to enter the business because it's still very old-fashioned in its structure. Most people coming into this business, there is no base pay. It is a 100% commission. You start at zero, and it takes years to build what I would call a decent income. And so you're expected to have 3 to 6 months worth of savings in the bank. You're expected to be able to self-support. And so now you take that burden and put it on women who are also homeschooling their children right now. It's virtually impossible to be entrepreneurial, launch into this business, have no money, very slow to make money, and still take care of all of the things that we as women tend to take care of. So that we're trying to, we've got, the good thing about the work that we're doing is we have a seat at the table with a lot of large company leaders, and we're really trying to advocate to change the way that women are recruited into this business. We're trying to help build base pay, fair wage, better than fair, because of the importance of this work. But we can't treat women coming in the way that we've historically treated men coming into the business. It's just a mismatch.
I think that that actually really aligns well with what you were saying about your internship being paid as well. Because it is about values and recognizing the privilege of who can show up for an internship or who can show up for an entry-level financial advisor job when you're not really getting paid. And so it's only going to be those people who are privileged enough to have other ways of support from their parents or whoever that end up taking those jobs. And so it's not going to engender change until we change the system. So I'm so glad that you pointed that out.
The same people, right?
Yeah.
It's just the same
types of people, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we have to break that. And the only way that we can do that is to make it financially incentivizing and fair, and just fair.
Right. Amy, I wanted to ask you as well, from the Women's Fund's earliest days, you've been a believer in the Women's Fund and our work, but I know that generally women and girls have been and continue to be the center of your philanthropy. With all the competing interests and needs in the world, why do you center women and girls?
Well, I love this question because I love that the answer is it all started with the Women's Fund. I was part of the original conversations when Diane Doherty and Sally Livingston were getting together and talking about forming the Women's Fund. And I was 25 at the time, right? 24, 25, I was a kid. And I had no money. So what I knew back then is the little that I had, this was something I wanted to be part of. And when Christy Nelson asked us to come together for the 2,000 women, each giving $2,000 by the year 2000, I didn't think that applied to me because I didn't have that kind of money. It was a $500 a year gift for 4 years. But I wanted so badly to do it because I wanted to be part of this thing that seemed very special and that it could be very impactful in our community. So I agreed to do it. That's where it started. That I became a philanthropist at 25 because I believed in the work and I believed that my money would make a difference. So that's where it began. And where it developed is over the years, we knew as financial advisors, we believe in investing for the long term. So to scatter your money out in a million different places, to me, is not very impactful. But if we can focus in on something that we care about, we're passionate about, and we really want to make a difference in, that for us became women and children, particularly women and girls. But then we had 2 boys. So as 2 women raising 2 boys, women and children became what was most important to us. When Kim and I had our wedding back in 2005, that's when we actually sat down with the kids and we developed our family's philanthropic philosophy. And we decided as a family that we were only going to give to organizations that grow, empower, and support women and children as leaders. And when we defined it that specifically, it did rule out a lot of other organizations. But I was okay with that because I wanted to invest more in fewer to make a bigger difference. And so that philosophy then spilled over into our business because it was just a very logical fit for financial advisors, certainly a team of women, and for our family and our business to have it aligned. And so that's where we focus. So it started with the Women's Fund, and now we love the Girl Scouts, we love Girls on the Run, we love Enchanted Circle Theater, we love Ohana Performing Arts, any organization that grows and supports women and children as leaders is where is my favorite investment.
That's awesome. And I think that I love that you said that it kind of aligns well with what you do in business as well, because it is all about being proactive. And you know, you're all about financial planning, and financial planning includes philanthropy. And it's about actually being intentional about it instead of reacting when different organizations ask you.
Well, I think too, if you can get really clear about what it is you care about and are passionate about, and you can state, you know, in one sentence, and this is what we help our clients do as part of our planning process, is develop a one-sentence philanthropic philosophy. When you can clearly state that and say it with enthusiasm, you can also be what I call a polite no thank you. So if XYZ organization calls me and says, hey, we're doing our capital campaign, we see you giving to other organizations, would you like to support ours? And it's a, I don't know, you know, a something-a-thon for a heart association, right? Wonderful organization. People are very passionate about that. But because our philanthropic philosophy is to support organizations that grow, develop, and empower women and children as leaders, I'm going to say no thank you to your ask, because we're trying to concentrate our dollars to fewer organizations to make a bigger impact. And the response to a no is, oh, that's awesome. Wow, can you say that again? How did you come up with that? And now suddenly, it's not rude to say no thank you. It's people understand it. And so I think it's a very empowering statement to be able to stand behind, and why we really try to help people with that, because then you can build philanthropy into your budget. You can financial plan and not feel bad about not being able to be a yes to everything.
Yes, and you're also being respectful of those other organizations' time and resources by letting them know quickly and efficiently that while they're doing amazing work, doesn't fit within your philanthropic priorities. So.
Right, and so a recent organization approached me and said, I hear that your philanthropic philosophy is, and stated it, and said, this is why I think you should support us. And she was, you know, 3 sentences in, I said, I'm in. You're completely right. Yes, I love what you're up to. So, and I think we aligned with our values. When we align our money with our values, it's just an easy yes.
That's awesome. Well, I want to bring this conversation home. Again, if anyone has any questions, throw them in the chat box. Otherwise, we are going to wrap this conversation, but I wanted to kind of do full circle back. Amy, as you know, you were there from the beginning, even before the Women's Fund was an actual 501c3. And in September, on September 11th, we're actually going to celebrate the trip to Beijing, the UN Women's Conference that launched the Women's Fund. And we're doing it by having a virtual conversation with global experts on women and girls, on peace, power, and prosperity for women and girls. So hopefully you and everyone who's listening can tune in to that event and all of our other events. You can visit our website, and under the Attend tab of our website, you can see all those events and register for them. Also wanted to give a shout out. We are going to be co-hosting on August 13th, Black Women's Equal Pay Day. So that's coming up in August, next month. And then in September, of course, we will be launching the Power Women Hour series, thanks to the Jamrog Group's leadership gift in that series. And we're going to have lots more things to do and timely topics along the way. And if you didn't get a chance to ask a question, but you have one after this conversation, do reach out, Donna at mywomensfund.org. We are even mulling over having a donor waking group for those who are interested in learning more about how to be anti-racist in their philanthropy and in their understanding. So if anyone in particular is interested in that, we would love to hear from you as well. Amy, we'd love to thank you for your time today and your investment from the beginning and through now. As you said, it's about long-term investment to see change. So we're so thrilled that you have been a long-term investor and have been able to see all the progress and all the women leaders that have come from your efforts and your investment as well.
Thank you.
Let me just see it. I just want to see if Liz Feely might have a question. Oh, no, she's just saying thank you so much to Donna and Amy for being thought leaders. So thank you, Liz Feely. It's always great to have you with us as well. And Liz has been volunteering to help us keep all of the domestic violence organizations in Western Massachusetts coping through COVID and also learning from each other. So thank you, Liz. I'm so glad that you're on the call with us. And if there's no other questions, definitely reach out to Donna at mywomensfund.org, and we will see you at our events in September and hopefully the August 13th Black Women's Equal Pay Day. And stay in touch. Thanks again, Amy.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.